I can see your face right now.
Nope, just like one of my eyes.
Okay, Murphy. It's like, no.
Bud.
Hey, it's Sue.
And Megan in the restricted section.
Today we're doing a sort of late February wrap-up.
Yes, we are. So while we talk about the books we read in February, we are going to be drinking this Romantic Chemistry IPA from Dogfish Head.
Yep, and this has apricot, what was it? Apricot, mango, and ginger.
And some very amorous looking
fruits
and hops.
Slash whatever hops is.
Hop. All right, well.
All right, I've been drinking it. I've had it before.
I actually like that. It's good.
I like it. It's like it's another IPA that's like, if you're transitioning into IPAs,
yeah,
that might be a good place to start.
It's a good one.
Because it's kind of fruity.
And that's how I like my IPAs. It's
Fruity.
Kind of fruity.
All right, so I read 9 books this month, which is like really good for me.
Kicking ass.
I think the Cozyathon really helped with that.
That was most of the books I read, was the Cozyathon, so.
Yeah. So
why don't you go ahead and go first?
The first one I finished was The Professor and the Madman by Simon Winchester, and this is a tale of murder, insanity, and the making of the Oxford English Dictionary. So it's about the making of the Oxford English Dictionary, but also about this man, Dr. W.C. Minor, I think was his name. W.C. Minor. And he helped a lot with the making of the Oxford English Dictionary, because they actually had just people reading books and finding words and sending in examples of how the words were used in the text. And
that's cool.
He did, with the exception of like one other person, I think he was like the most helpful person they had. But I come to find out that he was actually living in a mental institution at the time for like, it was like a criminally, what do you call that?
Like for the, I think probably back then it would have been for the criminally insane.
Yeah, I mean, they called it like a madhouse and things that aren't PC to
correct
say
now.
today.
Yeah.
But yeah, he had what today would probably be like paranoid schizophrenia or something along those lines, and he murdered a man because he was, in his head, thought this man was like going to harm him in some way, and the man was just a guy going to work, and
it's unfortunate,
was killed. And W.C. Minor spent most of the rest of his life in a mental institution. He finally got out and was sent back to his homeland of America. This happened in somewhere in Britain when he was like elderly. So
interesting.
It was an interesting story. I wouldn't say I really loved this book. I thought it could have been better. It could have been, I don't know, organized better, or I don't know. It was okay though. I think I gave it 3 stars, maybe 3.5.
Did it not like flow very well?
Yeah, I don't know. Like it kind of switched back and forth between chapters about W.C. Minor and chapters about the Oxford English Dictionary, which was fine, but I don't know. It seems like it's been so long since I read it that I'm having a hard time remembering what exactly my issue was with it. But I don't know. Something about the writing was not my favorite. Sorry, I can't be more specific at this point, but it's been a while.
That is fair.
So obviously it was nothing so terrible that that it's burned in my memory or anything, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, if you've read 9 books, you're at 8 books since then,
right.
It's gonna... Alright, the first book that I finished in February was Red Queen by Christina Henry. This was for Cozyathon. This is a sequel. It's a sequel to Alice by Christina Henry. It's an Alice in Wonderland retelling. I liked this, but I didn't like it as much as the first book. It was good, but it wasn't great. I gave it 3 stars.
And the next one I read was also for Cozyathon. We're just going to go through these quickly because we already did a wrap-up, so we'll link that below if you guys want to check that out. But the first one I read was Like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel, and I gave it 3.5 stars, I believe. I feel like these books, it feels like it's been a long time since I read them.
It kind of does seem like that to me too. Like this one, I was like trying to remember what exactly it was that I didn't love about it.
Yeah.
The next book I read for Cozyathon was This Is Where I Leave You by Jonathan Tropper. This is a story of a man whose marriage is kind of fucked up, and also his dad dies, and so it's about like the family and him trying to figure things out. So I really liked it. I thought it was really funny, and I liked it a lot. I gave it 4 stars.
And next I read Stars Above by Marissa Meyer, which is like a supplementary short story collection that takes part in the world of the Lunar Chronicles. And I thought it was okay. Most of the stories seemed unnecessary, so I gave it 3 stars.
That's fair. The next book I finished was Chocolat by Joanne Harris, and I gave that one 3 stars because I just felt like the whole book was like much ado about nothing. I was like, I don't care.
The next one I finished was The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien, and I bet he read this with Jessica and Christina from Game of Tones, and I really enjoyed this. I gave it, excuse me, I gave it 4 stars.
Nice. I then finished Kindred by Octavia Butler, the graphic novel adaptation, and I loved this. I thought it was great. I gave it 4 stars. Everyone read Octavia Butler right now.
Yeah, and we did a full review of that one too, so we'll link that below as well.
Yes.
And the next one I finished, again for Cozyathon, was Chocolat by Joanne Harris.
Chocolat.
I think I liked this a little bit more than Megan did, but I had already watched and loved the movie, so I feel like maybe that influenced my enjoyment. I think I gave it 3.5 stars again. I think.
Yeah, I would really love to see the movie because I think from what you described, I think the movie would be good.
Yeah, I'll bring it to you sometime when I remember because I own it.
Yeah.
And that's all the books I finished for Cozyathon.
Same.
And then the next one that I finished was actually Kindred by Octavia Butler, the graphic novel adaptation by Octavia Butler, Damien Duffy, and John Jennings. And I also loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars.
Wonderful. The last book that I finished in February was Fledgling by Octavia Butler. That is a book about a little vampire girl. She's found kind of wandering by this man and picked up, and she doesn't have any memory of what happened to her. She looks like a 11 or 12-year-old girl, but she's actually much older because she's a vampire. But she's an adolescent vampire, I guess, and there's something going on. Somebody is targeting families, hers specifically, of vampires, and so she's trying to figure out why and who it is and what the fuck. So it was uncomfortable to read because there are some sexual scenes between the vampire girl and the man who is an adult and not a vampire, and she looks like a child, so that's fairly uncomfortable.
Yeah, and that happens like right away too, because I started it. I haven't been able to finish it because I had to put it down for other things, but I got about 70 pages into it, I think, and it's uncomfortable already.
Yeah, it's because it kind of like leads in with the uncomfortableness, you know, before you even know how old she is, this is happening, and so, I mean, it alludes to the fact that she's older, because it says, you know, she knows that she's older than a child, but she doesn't know how old, and blah, 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 but, like, it's still...
Yeah, and I mean,
strange.
it is like, it's not just that he's a pedophile, it's like, after she bites him, he then becomes like, it's something in her...
that causes him to be attracted to her.
Right.
So it's not like he saw her and sought her
they
out
have
with
like
that
a
intention.
symbiotic relationship.
Right. So it's not like the whole vampire-child relationship in Let the Right One In, where the guy is a pedophile.
The guy was a pedophile, yeah.
This is a little bit different than that. So,
Yeah.
but still uncomfortable. I really liked it. I thought it was really good. But of course it's Octavia Butler, and everyone knows that I feel like she can't do wrong. So I gave that one 4 stars.
The next book I finished was Heart of a Dog by Mikhail Bulgakov. And this is like a parable for the Russian Revolution. But it's about this professor who finds a stray dog, and he transplants the pituitary gland and testes of a petty criminal into this dog. And it turns into something he did not expect. And it was really kind of a funny book and interesting. I don't know much about the Russian Revolution, so I will say that I probably should have researched that more before reading it. But it was still really enjoyable to read. I know it's very short, so I read it in like a day. So yeah, I liked it. I think I gave it 4 stars.
Nice. And that will cover your challenge for the read a book set in a BRICS country.
Yes, because it's set in Russia.
Russia.
And then the last book I read this month was, I listened to, oh wait, I lied. I skipped
Just
one.
kidding.
I have 2 more books. One I finished earlier in the month and accidentally skipped over, but I was listening to it on audiobook, and it's called The Dogstars by Peter Heller. And this was a post-apocalyptic novel where like this flu has wiped out most of the population. And this follows a man named Hig, I think, if I recall correctly. And it's kind of just about him surviving in this relationship he has with an older man who they kind of have like a love-hate sort of relationship. And when I say relationship, I mean like friendship, not
Right, not like romantic relationship.
no. And it's very much a like kill or be killed kind of world at this point. But Hig is kind of not a killer, and so this older man, I forget his name now, kind of like takes care of that for him. And Hig can fly a plane, like he still has access to that and to fuel, so he flies to like get supplies and things like that. But I can't remember, I think I gave this book 3 stars. It was kind of boring for the most part, but then the end was really good. So, yeah.
So if you can suffer through the boring parts, the end was worth it.
And I will say, like, I listened to an audiobook, so I don't think I got this as much because it wasn't read in a very super stilted manner, but I know I had initially started to read the physical book and then was like, I'm not gonna have time to do this because this was a book club book for me, which I still didn't get done in time, but whatever. So I started listening to the audiobook instead, and it's written in very short stilted sentences, like throughout.
Okay.
So I know a lot of people had issues with the writing style, but I didn't get that as much in the audiobook, but I'm not sure if I liked that the person reading it didn't really read it that way. You know what I mean?
Right, it wasn't like true to the way that it was written, so you're not really getting the same experience that you would if you were reading it yourself.
But my favorite part was that they mentioned one of my favorite books that I've never heard anybody else talk about, which is We Die Alone.
Oh!
by David Howard.
Nice.
He mentions it in this book, and I was like, oh, I love that book! I love that book! Much more than this book.
This book is just okay.
But then the last book I read this month was also an audiobook, again for book club. But it was a nonfiction book called Blind Spot, The Hidden Biases of Good People by Mazarin Banaji. Actually, I think there's 2 authors. It only lists one here. Mazarin Banaji and Anthony Greenwald. And this one I also gave 3 stars. It was, I feel like it's like a good introduction to this subject.
Okay.
Of like, we all have hidden biases, whether it's like, a secret preference for a certain race or gender or, about social class or whatever. It may be like, we all have them.
Yeah, everybody does.
And I feel like most of the information in this book was stuff that I had already read, either in other books or in articles online or what have you. So it was kind of boring for that reason.
That's fair.
But if you have never really read anything about the subject, I think it would be a good introduction to it. And it talks about what are those tests called? Harvard University has these tests you can take. They have a certain name. I can't remember. But it's supposed to like show you your hidden biases, and it talks a lot about those tests in here, but I have to admit that I'm kind of skeptical of those tests because I took the race one a long time ago. I just came across it somewhere and took it a long time ago, and it told me I preferred black people, which doesn't really make sense because I grew up in a predominantly white place,
right?
So it would make more sense for me to prefer white people. But I seem to recall that because what it makes you do is like associate. You know, it'll give you show you either white faces or black faces, and then show you either positive words or negative words, and it'll have you like hit either the left or right key.
Right, to associate the faces with the words.
Yeah, and I feel like the first time I took it, it had me first associate black faces with positive words and then flipped it on me. So I was more used to that.
Right.
And then the second time I took it again, when I was reading this, and it told me I preferred white people. And this time it had me associate white faces with positive words first.
Interesting.
So I'm like, I feel like that affects it
it's
more.
Kind of skewed, yeah.
More than what my feelings actual
biases are.
And then I took the one to see, there was one to see if you found Asian Americans or European Americans to be more American. And again, I felt like the test didn't make sense because what it does there is show you either Asian faces or white faces, and then shows you pictures of like landmarks or monuments in either America or elsewhere in the world. But the ones, like my result was that I strongly thought Asian Americans were more American than European Americans. But I'm like, most of the foreign pictures they showed me were things in Europe. So of course I'm going to associate European American, you know, like I was like, this doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense.
So I don't know. I was not sold on these tests.
Maybe not like super
really,
reliable or valid tests.
But anyway, that was just an aside. Overall, I thought the book was alright.
So yeah, you had a really strong month in February, especially because it was a short month.
I know.
Damn.
I'm doing way better. I mean, I'm already doing way worse this month than I was in February.
Well,
I've only finished one book this month. So
9 books is a little bit hard to compete with.
I did finish the one book I finished. I read in like a day.
Yeah, the one book that I have finished this month, I read really quickly because I needed to read it for our live show.
Yeah, we both need to read it for our live show, and so we're like, fuck.
Gotta get this done. But yeah, so I feel pretty good about my reading month in February. I liked most of the books I read. I felt like I didn't really read much until Cozyathon, and then that kind of spurred me on, so that was really helpful.
Yeah, Cozyathon really, like sometimes readathons
really just kind of help.
They do.
Yeah.
So it was good. This beer
Fine,
is good. I like it.
I do too. I really like it. He was whining for us to let him up here, so I'm a sucker, and I did. I felt bad for him.
You want some beer?
Even though he's been held all day today. Beer no is for doggies. Do they make wine for cats? It's like it's obviously non-alcoholic, but I wonder if they make like something like that, beer for dogs or something that's fine for them to have.
If not, we should.
We should get a corner on that market. Yeah, something that was safe for them to drink. Oh, Murphy, can you look? Here, look. Yeah, no, he's usually not very cooperative. Hi. Yeah.
Murphy's much cuter than that dog.
He's much cuter, and he's actually he's a good citizen. Yeah, he's a good citizen. Okay, so
he's just fully sitting on the table right now.
He's very ill behaved.
So So there will be some links below where you can find us other places on the internet.
And if you're not already subscribed to the restricted section, you should do so.
Yeah, you'll see plenty of this guy.
You'll see plenty of Murphy because he loves to be in these videos.
Everyone loves dogs.
So, subscribe to Murphy. And then stay for the books.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.